Good evening, guys. Good evening. Welcome to the second session of Decoding Mental Health. Honestly, I haven't planned doing a second session, but looking at the positive response, I have been thinking of doing more shows, more live session as per my schedule allows. Last time we did a session which was very generic about mental health, about depression, anxiety, parenting to TRPs. But this time we are going very specific on our first topic, that is parenting, parents, and pandemic. I think again it's everything. So I used to do a theater show called Taboo Talks. उसमें एक piece था called Baby Gandesi, मतलब the grand mom used to say. उसमें एक 16 साल का लड़का रैंट करता है, बायोलॉजी का एग्ज़ाम होता है, फिजिक्स का एग्ज़ाम होता है, ड्राइवरी का एग्ज़ाम होता है, पर कोई मॉम डैड बन सकता है कि नहीं, उसका एग्ज़ाम क्यों नहीं होता. सो ऑनेस्टली कोई एग्ज़ाम नहीं होता है, बट कोर्स भी नहीं होता है, बट वी हैव एन एक्सपर्ट who knows mental health much better than us, who knows parenting much better than us. He will be joining with us now, Dr. Shishir. I will be adding him, and let's see what he has to say about parenting. Hi, Shishir. How are you?
Hi, very well. Good evening,
Good
Baljeet.
evening. Good evening.
Very good evening
So,
to audience as well, your fans.
they are your fans.
Right.
So, yes. So, this is my second session I'm doing on mental health. Earlier, I did a very generic session, but this time I wanted a very topic specific, and who would know better than you about parenting and mental health. So, let's start with a very basic question, that is, why is mental health important for your child?
Mental health is very important for children and especially adolescents, is because these are their formative years, which means the foundation is laid for the future. So the temperament of the child and adolescent, how it is, and how their mental health is directly affects their academic performance, professional performance, and relationships in future. So, and at the same time, the age of childhood and adolescence is a very important age where their cognitive development means the development of their brain is not sufficient, but they're bombarded with a lot of information, then a lot of context, a lot of issues which they are not ready to handle. And this can have a lifelong impact on their future. At the same time, the risk for disorders like depression, anxiety is very high in children and adolescents. The
Okay.
risk of suicide is high in children and adolescents. At the same time, the risk of what we say, road traffic injuries, because they could be very impulsive, um, they could be engaging in high risk behavior, peer pressure. So risk of alcohol addictions and road traffic injury, everything is very high in children and adolescents. So if things can be fixed at this time of the life, then you can say that it can affect or it can have a very positive influence on their future.
Like you said, that the kids are bombarded with information. Not just the kid, we all are bombarded with information. What can parents do about it? Like the information that is reaching the kids is the right information, if I say. So, what can parents
See,
do about it?
there are two aspects to this. One, limit the information that's reaching them. For instance, having parental controls. But as you know, children are very smart, and there are at least 6 to 7 devices at home. So it's really tough for parents to limit and regulate all the information that's reaching them. So the second aspect is preparing them for that information, which is processing this information with them. For instance, the other day I was driving with my son, and the
Okay.
song came up, Char Peg or Char Bottle Vodka. Yeah, it
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
Char Bottle Vodka.
Vodka. Yeah.
I had a choice to quickly change the channel, radio channel, but I didn't. And I asked him, hey, what does this Char Bottle mean? And he said, it means Daru.
Hmm.
He was
How
12
old?
years
How
old then.
old? Okay. Yeah.
12. At the time, he was 12 years old. So, I knew that he knew this stuff. So I took this as a learning opportunity or a teaching opportunity. And at that moment, I asked him, why should people not drink alcohol? So he said, people meet accidents when they drink alcohol. And I asked something else. And he said, no, that's it. So that was a
Okay.
teaching opportunity for me. So I could educate him with different things. So at the same time, when we are watching Netflix, we are watching teleserials, and sometimes the content is not actually meant for children, but they peep into your bedroom and they start watching.
Hmm.
So at this time, it is important for you to not get embarrassed, but actually educate them about the consequences of what they might be doing. So if they
Hmm.
choose to do the same thing, for instance, if it is violence, and the character is typically gets away with it, the character does the violence, but they get away with it. You need to educate children that what if we do this in real life, what will happen. So they
Okay.
need to understand the consequences. We call this as a teachable moment. Every parent has an embarrassing moment. The same embarrassing moment can be turned into a teachable moment.
It's good to be embarrassed at home than happening sometime outside the home.
There is no point in
But
getting embarrassed.
I,
I say that convert the embarrassing moment to a teachable moment. What can you
hmm,
learn if the child does the same thing? They don't have consequential thinking, which means
hmm,
they cannot predict the consequences beyond a specific time. For instance, their sense of time is very immediate. So very
hmm,
small children just don't have consequential thinking. If I do this, what will happen? Adolescents actually have consequential thinking, but they don't implement it in their real life. So they say, like, "Jab hoga tab dekh lenge."
okay.
We'll deal
Hmm,
with it when it happens.
hmm.
So it is important for parents to make them understand that every action and also inaction has a consequence for them. So this is what I'm calling as a teachable moment. That teach one thing in every embarrassing situation.
Okay. But I find Indian parents shy away from the conversations. I see
It's
a
all
lot happening
over.
in, yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
all over. I have seen parents from all over, and the parenting issues are exactly similar, though the
Okay.
culture makes slight differences, and the contexts are different. But mostly, I have seen that parenting issues are more or less very, very similar across the globe.
Okay. So we just have to realize that we all are in the same boat. We need to understand this and make our kids learn. So coming from that, you have a program called Core for the kids. I think it's for the uh, preschool, school, and the it's called a preventive education program for the preschool, schools, and the youth. Tell us more
Right.
about what Core is and why this program.
And we all believe that prevention is better than cure. And
Hmm.
by the time we start developing we start treating problems of children and adolescents, it's pretty late. By that time, a lot of damage
Hmm.
has been done. And so I thought that why don't we teach these children the mental health concepts right from the moment when they learn language. So even
Okay.
preschool children and nursery children can be taught mental health concepts like simple education of emotional labels, and then higher grades can be taught of higher concepts like feeling depressed, anxiety, and their behaviors, their action, their thoughts and belief systems. So we teach such concepts to children. I've been conducting this program in many schools for the last 5 to 6 years now,
Okay.
and it is very well received. The basic purpose is to shape them in their formative years. It's like it's a clay pot, and
Hmm.
if you do not shape it when it's wet, it's gonna harden, and by the time it sets, it's very difficult to change its shape. So the same concept with children and adolescents: shape their mentality or their mindset right in the beginning when it's the right time.
So what do you mean by shaping it well? Not everyone is accessible to this program. So what can parents I don't think schools have a curriculum about mental health. What can parents do about small things that they should take care about so the programming is good?
All right, so almost all schools now have emotional and social development. There is a small
Okay.
subject, but it is
Hmm.
I do not know how structured it is for all the
Hmm.
schools. Some boards have implemented that, and some boards have made that compulsory. But the problem is, it is delivered by teachers and not psychologists. So the
Okay.
teachers are already burdened with a lot of training and
Hmm.
delivery. So they
So
may not
it's
be necessarily
so
equipped.
it's like an additional subject they have to teach along with what they are
Yes.
teaching. Okay,
Correct. But they're not
it's fine.
psychologists. So
Hmm.
when it
Yeah.
comes to answering questions, the teachers
Hmm.
may not be. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
saying all teachers would be, but may not be equipped with the concepts and the training. So what can parents do? Not very difficult. It's not rocket science to teach children some mental health concepts. First of all, I would say the best thing parents can do is to model expected behavior in children. So if they model something with what they expect from children, for
Hmm.
instance, let us say that two kids are fighting, and we don't want them to yell and fight and hit each other.
Hmm.
But if the
Yeah.
parent does the same thing, is that they hit the children to stop them from hitting each other, they are modeling bad behavior or unhelpful behavior.
Hmm.
So a rather calmer but firmer approach would probably help in this situation. So first thing parents can do is to model expected behavior, then teach them simple things like you can take up any story or an anecdote and teach simple concepts like managing your feelings well, consequences, and these things are not new. Every Panchatantra story, for instance, has some
Hmm.
moral.
Some all right.
So
Yeah.
look at stories and pick up these stories. Even in real life, you can teach them very simple things. For instance, if you're driving and if you stop on a red signal and there is nobody around. I mean, like that's not a very common scene in Mumbai,
Hmm.
but in smaller cities like Nagpur, we see this often that there are no traffic police, and
Okay.
I usually ask my child like, hey, there is nobody watching. There are no cameras as well. What
Hmm.
if we simply jump the signal?
Hmm.
So then it gets them thinking that all right, this can be done, and we can get away with it, but what can happen?
Okay.
So I think parents can teach everyday concepts like take them to market, take them to your office,
Hmm.
and teach them the real life skills that are required. Tell them
Okay.
from your personal experience that there was a conflict at my office and I'm not getting along well with my boss or my subordinate. What do I do? So
Hmm.
ask children to, give their inputs. This is the way we can teach children mental health concepts. You don't have to sign up a structured program, but modeling is the best effective teaching parents can do.
Okay. And modeling is more about thinking the reaction of your actions, what consequence it will have. It's more like
Okay.
make them think कि मैंने ये किया तो उससे क्या हो सकता है, or
Correct.
like that you're saying, है ना?
Absolutely.
Uh, okay. In the times of, I will now divide kids into different categories. Let's start with kids who are say under 6, 7. During the pandemic, I have seen a lot of my friends both working because they don't have time. They have given their cell phones to the kids, and the kids are investing so much time on screen that I feel can be very unhealthy for their mental health. Also, they are not having any social interaction. So once this is over, the new normal can be challenging for the kids. So what should the parents do in present situation where the kid is spending so much time on screen, and when the pandemic is over or we have a new normal when they will go back to the school, what things should parents cater to?
Right. Number one, let's talk about screen time. We had discussions about screen time some time back as well. Not all screen time is bad. It's only
Hmm.
recreational screen time that is bad. For instance, if there are fast-moving objects or high-resolution graphics and sounds, so such screen time is bad for the child's health
Okay.
because it resets your stimulation threshold to a higher threshold, and then everything else appears very boring to the child. So we recommend that any recreational screen time should not exceed 2 hours
Okay.
for children and adolescents both. In any other screen time, for example, they are using it for their creative purposes or
Hmm.
learning, is also harmful, but not as harmful as the recreational screen time. It is harmful because it leads to inertia. They are not moving around at that time. So it leads to muscle weakness and obesity.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
such things are there with that screen time, but recreational screen time must be monitored. So how to deal with a lot of screen time? First is modeling again. You need to be
Okay.
off your screens.
Hmm.
Imagine that you are in 1980s where not a lot of screens were used. So we had a good regulation, self-regulation of how much screen you use. So one
Hmm.
thing is modeling. Second thing is having the day structured.
Okay.
So they need to have they need to wake up at a specific time, and they have their online classes, and then after the online classes they need to have some activities that they will be doing. So monitor this these activities that you have actually sat down and agreed to. For instance, from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock you're going to do this. From 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock you're going to do this. So involve them in the rule making and have
Hmm.
a very structured day, and leave a lot of time for unstructured play. So they could be creating something. Now, the major obstacle that will come here is boredom. The children will get bored.
Yeah.
How to react to boredom is very important. Parents must teach children that boredom is okay. Getting bored is okay, and boredom is a
Hmm.
part of life. You don't have to do something to get stimulated. And slowly they will adapt to
Hmm.
boredom and
But
not do
how to do
things.
that? How to convince a child that boredom is okay? I don't
Right.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to accept that boredom is a part of life, and you don't have to do anything. And
Hmm.
you could give examples like, what are the things that you do when you're bored? And then they say, so I do a small experiment, is like take a glass of water and
Okay.
add a teaspoon of sugar to it, and then ask the child to drink it and tell you that how sweet is it on a 0 to 10 scale.
Hmm.
So they would say somewhere around 5 and 6, and then give them a teaspoon of sugar.
Hmm.
And after 1 minute, ask them to taste the same water again and ask them, how sweet is it now? So they would say 1 or 2.
Hmm.
So the water is as sweet, but because you
Hmm.
already ate sweet, the
Okay.
water tastes
Hmm.
very insipid. So we tell
Hmm.
them the same thing. If you do high intensity activities, for instance, screen, so your brain gets adapted to a higher level of stimulation. And this results, which is every other activity, including studies, helping parents with daily chores, everything appears boring. So their own behavior is contributing to boredom. So this is number one,
Hmm.
that how they are
Hmm.
increasing their own boredom. We teach them. And you teach them that boredom is actually a part of life, and the ways with which we deal with boredom could be unhelpful. Not everything is unhelpful. For instance, painting or any activity that creates something may not be necessarily unhelpful, but drugs or alcohol or cigarettes or even screens, or
Hmm.
spending money on internet or eating, all these things can be harmful. So divide things into
Hmm.
how do people
Any
react
kind
to
of
boredom.
addiction can be harmful.
Yes, yes. So divide things into what could be unhelpful in the longer run, and say that doing nothing is okay. You don't have to do anything, right, to kill boredom.
Okay. Uh, let's move to the next category of kids that are the
Sure.
teenagers. Again, teenagers are spending a lot of time on screen, but considering the kind of hatred that is on social media right now and the kind of stubborn the teenagers are, you have teenager kids, I guess. So, how do you
Yes.
manage to control what they're consuming and convince them what they're consuming is not good for them when there's so much on social media?
Number one, control is something that I really don't believe in.
Hmm.
I believe that I can influence my children, but I cannot control them.
Okay.
I
Hmm.
often give this example to parents that in a child's life, you need to be like Google Maps. So show them the path,
Hmm.
and if you make a mistake, the Google Maps says, in 200 meters, take a U-turn. So it doesn't
Hmm.
yell at you. I told you take the left turn. Why
Hmm.
did you take the right turn? It doesn't yell at you.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
imagine if Google Maps started doing that, you would throw it
Hmm.
away, right? So be
I
like
will meet
Google
an
Maps.
accident. I will meet an accident if she does that.
So
Yeah.
be like Google Maps. That every time you make a mistake, you tell
Hmm.
them the right way. So this is one, you make a mistake, fine. I'm
Okay.
here for you.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that the mistake is okay, but this is the next thing that you could
Hmm.
do. Instead of being like a CCTV camera, I call these parents as drone parenting. In drone
Okay.
parenting, you're hovering over the child's head all the
Hmm.
time, trying to monitor every single thing they are consuming.
Hmm.
But it's impossible. It's gonna exhaust you. You have to manage yourself. You have to monitor your behavior. You have to monitor your
Hmm.
spouse's behavior, your
Hmm.
in-laws' behavior, and your neighbor's behavior, and your children's behavior. That can be very exhausting, right?
Hmm.
So equip children with the skills that they self-monitor their behavior and reinforce it when they monitor their own behavior and they self-regulate it. So I think teaching this has to be consistent. It just can't be taught once and the child learns it. No,
Hmm.
every time the child shows or displays that they have managed themselves better than last time, reinforce it. Praise their ability to monitor themselves. So instead of comparing that with another child, so self-monitoring is very, very, very important. And again, what was the second part of the question?
So once they join back, I think that was the question for the previous question. Even for this thing, once the kids join back schools, there had been a 6 month gap of social distancing and not meeting people socially. It might have
Correct.
affected them in some manners. So once
Right.
they get back to the normal, they should the parents think of certain things that they should make their kids understand once they are getting back to the normal thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the I remembered the second part of your question was there is a lot
Hmm.
of toxicity on social media. First of all,
Yeah.
children must not have social media accounts, but they still do have. So educate them
And
about
you can't,
the
yeah, you
yeah.
can't control that, I think. Yeah.
You can't control. You can influence it, but you cannot control it. So
Hmm.
children
Hmm.
will definitely have some toxicity that they will face. Again, let them
Hmm.
face it. I would suggest that let them face it and then talk about it. Like, okay, fine, this person gave you shit, and then how to react to
Hmm.
it. So I
Hmm.
usually take examples like depending on the age of the child. So I tell them that you could be like a sponge, and if you put the sponge into water, it absorbs everything and it becomes heavy.
Hmm.
So if you are like sponge and you absorb everything, every label that people throw at you, your heart is gonna be heavy with
Hmm.
all these negative labels and negative things that people throw at you. Don't be like a sponge. And if you have to be like a sponge, squeeze it out, remove all the labels and all the negativity that people have thrown at you. Though it will be a little wet, so that would probably work as a constructive criticism that you can work on yourself, but
Hmm.
your heart would be lighter. So don't absorb everything like sponge. Squeeze it once in a while and don't accept every negativity that is thrown at you. And when it comes to getting back to the schools, I think one of the skills that we need to teach children is adapt.
Shashi, your voice is breaking. Hello? Hello? Yeah, now you're audible.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I have a small cactus in my consultation chamber, and I keep. And people say that you shouldn't be keeping a cactus in your house, but I say that no,
Hmm.
it's very important to keep a cactus because the cactus inspires us to be adaptable. Cactus has
Hmm.
adapted itself to very harsh conditions over millions of years. And we could learn from cactus that every time the situation can change, you could simply perish in that situation, but you could also thrive and you could bloom in a very harsh situation like a
Hmm.
cactus. Not the thorns, but the thick skin of the cactus will inspire us to adapt to changing environment. So now it is lockdown, it is people are socially distancing. So this is a new situation you need to adapt to. And then when you get back to school, there would be a new situation that you need to adapt to. So teach them skills like adaptation and how not to absorb everything that is thrown at you. And your children would probably react in a better way.
Okay, I think that answers it. Now comes the third category, which is, I think, I feel a lot of parents after a certain age become kids. since the lockdown, a lot of people of my age have gone back to their homes, and they've seen their parents becoming really stubborn, and the friction between the parent and the kid is increasing. So when a kid is parenting the parent, what should he or she do about it?
First, they should try to look for a remote control that would control their parents. And if they can't find it, they should stop or give up the basic idea of controlling parents. You can't control your parents. You can't control your own behavior. Sometimes, you find it
How?
very difficult to change your own habits. And if your parents
Hmm.
have done certain habits over few decades, it is very difficult for you to help them unlearn those habits unless they are willing to. So always remember, you can influence people, but people will behave the way they want,
They
not the way
want.
you want. You can make them want to behave in a specific way, but you can't change any other person, be it a parent, be it a child, be it a spouse. You can't change them. So give up the idea of changing any other person. And number two is choose your battles. You don't have to pick up
Hmm.
all the battles with your parents or
Yeah.
kids. Not everything needs to be addressed. You simply may pretend to be oblivious to what is happening to many of these things. And to a
Hmm.
majority of show your
But then
disapproval
there
that
will always be a elephant in the room.
right, this is one. And number two, you can show your disapproval that I do not like what you're doing and I would prefer you to do it differently.
This
So
one. Hmm.
a lot of things can be assertively addressed where you show your disapproval that you don't like it. But it has to be assertive. If you're aggressive towards everything that the other person does, then it's only going to lead to a chain reaction. The other person is going to get aggressive and there will be a power struggle. And finally, they will say that I'm going to show you who is in control. So the basic issue
Hmm.
would remain somewhere else and they will get into a power struggle. So aggression is not going to help. Submission is like not going to help because there will be an elephant in the room. I'm saying choose your battles. Not
Okay.
everything needs to be addressed. But assertion is very good. Like show your disapproval and also show them or tell them that I would rather expect you to behave this way. So
Okay.
that may
Hmm.
pass on the
Hmm.
message and they may choose to react differently.
Hmm.
But finally, it's your reactions are in your own hand, not their reactions.
Hmm. So it's more about conveying what you want to say, but not getting aggressive about it. But
Oops, I lost your
like
voice.
I'm saying, without getting aggressive about anything, just
I
convey
can't hear
what you want
you.
to say. I can. I can. I don't know what's wrong. Can you hear
Uh,
me?
I don't know what happened. Suddenly I lost your voice.
Should I add you again?
Yeah,
Let
this is
me.
good. Okay, say that
Okay.
again.
So I'm saying it's more about not being aggressive, but still conveying what you want to say to your parents. That's what you
Right.
mean by
I can
addressing.
barely hear you. I think probably if you take off the earphones, maybe that would be better.
Okay.
The
Just a
audience is able
second.
to hear both of us.
Hmm. Let me hear your voice. Can you hear me now?
Um, it's the same thing. Okay, so give me one moment and you could
Yeah.
introduce me till that moment so that I'll be
Sure.
back
So
on
let me
track.
just. So we are with Dr. Shishir. Doctor, audience, if you have any question, we will be ending the session in next 10 seconds. So if you have any question about specific about parenting, parents, you can send your questions. I will ask Shishir. Shishir, Dr. Shishir is MD MSc psychiatrist from he's a psychotherapist. He's a dynamic trainer, international motivational speaker, life coach, a medical doctor, a corporate trainer, so much in one person. So, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Okay.
I was just introducing you, and then I realized that you are born in a small town near Nagpur, studied in the
Correct.
best schools in the world like Harvard, Boston, Albert Ellis Institute, New York, and then Philadelphia. How this happened? Coming from a small town.
Okay, and I grew up when there was no internet,
Hmm.
thankfully.
Yeah.
So it's only when I came to a big city that I came to know about education, and my constant dissatisfaction with poor quality education has finally led me to seek further education. And then when I finally went to Albert Ellis Institute, New York, I realized that, my God, the education is 25 years ahead of time than what I was. So it was like a time
Okay.
travel to me.
Hmm.
My
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
first travel abroad, that to New York, and the kind of education that I received, I quickly got addicted to it. And then, one thing led to other, which is I brought the institute to India, which is having an affiliated training center of those institutes in
Okay.
India. I think it's persistence, keep doing things that you really enjoy, and a constant dissatisfaction that I want to do better
Hmm.
than what I'm doing now. And then finally, yes, being content with what you have done. I think persistence is something that led me to where I am today.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So we'll come back to our questions. I asked the
Sure.
audience to ask certain question. We have a question, which is my question is about the timetable idea. What if kids are involved in making the timetable but don't
Mhm.
follow? That's the
All
question. Yeah.
right. So let's talk about timetables, and we call something called as a logical consequence. There are two consequences. One is a natural consequence. For instance, if the child does not follow the timetable, naturally things are going to fall apart. For instance, they won't have time for play. They won't probably have time for studies. So there would be a natural consequence to what they happen. What will actually happen. So teach them a natural consequence. There
Hmm.
is one more thing called as logical consequence, which is an artificially set up consequence. If the child does not follow the timetable, you first agree upon a consequence that their screen time would be taken away by half an hour, or their play time would be reduced by half an hour, or they will have to sleep half an hour early, or agree upon something that is not a punishment, but that is taking away a privilege.
Okay.
So this helps children understand that they can't get away with not following the
Hmm.
timetable. So there would be automatically a consequence, that is one thing, but parents are going to impose another consequence to it. So don't yell and scream at children. Give them a logical consequence which has been pre-agreed upon, and it is usually taking away a privilege rather than yelling or screaming at the child.
Okay.
This may take a little bit of time to establish at home, that if you are firm and
Hmm.
your spouse is firm and your grandparents and your own parents are very firm and consistent with this,
Hmm.
um, this can be established at home, that the children don't follow a timetable, and then there is a consequence that they have to face.
That's a very amazing thing, actually. Rather than
Thank you.
punishing your child, you should
Absolutely.
actually, they need to know firstly how privileged they are, and taking away a small privilege is a good thing. That's a great thing, I think, for every parent to do. So that takes me to the next question. Do you feel the schools are doing enough for the mental growth of the kids?
Depends. A lot of schools are not really focusing. So,
Hmm.
collectively speaking,
Hmm.
schools are not doing much. A lot of schools are doing a lot in terms of
Hmm.
mental health of children. But I would say that a lot of schools are not doing enough for the mental health. They think that children would grow
Hmm.
up and grow out of these problems. In fact, this is not true. Children become worse and worse as they grow up if their foundation is weak. So,
So how can a parent monitor the mental? There's no, I think, is there any test they can take, or what? How can they monitor the mental growth of their kid?
see, most of the children do not present with problems. There are two types of
Hmm.
problems that parents can look at. One are red flags. That absolute red flags are aggression. The child is
Hmm.
hitting someone. Second is the child thinks or talks about harming themselves or harming another person. Their
Hmm.
academic scores are falling. Their weight is rapidly increasing or rapidly decreasing. They have mood swings which are unusual for the same age. And if if they have harmed themselves in some way. So there are
Okay.
certain red flags that we need to watch, especially academic
Hmm.
scores have been falling, and then
Yeah.
you get complaints from the school. Such red flags can be observed. But children are brought to treatment majority of times by the parents, not because they have a problem, not because they are disturbed, but because they are disturbing. So only children who create problems are brought to treatment. A majority of children don't show that they have an issue. So a lot of children get depressed and are anxious. They are shy and withdrawn, but parents are not able to catch that this child also has a problem. Only angry and aggressive children are noticed. So the wheel that squeaks get the grease first. That's a saying, but a lot of children actually have problems, but they are not able to express themselves. They are seen to be shy. So if we are watchful towards certain red flags, I'm sure that parents can monitor their child's mental health. But children can be very, very deceptive in terms of how they feel, especially if your reactions have been very extreme. So I would suggest that build a very strong relationship with children. My advice to parents is try to be friendly with children, but don't be friends with your child. Don't lose your
Okay.
authority with the child. So try to be
So
friendly,
you have
but not
to
friends. Yes.
bring the
Yeah. You
balance between the two.
absolutely. So don't lose your authority. And if children are okay with talking to you even about their mistakes, and if you educate them how to behave better rather than yell and scream at them, they are likely to tell majority of problems that they face.
Okay. So we have two more questions because it's already 37 minutes. So we will take these two questions.
Sure.
And the first one is how do you make parents let go of their worry about the future of their 20 plus 25-year aged plus child who's independent?
You can't do that, but we call this extended parenting, where the parenting never ends. They have every right to worry about the child, but how
Yeah.
you react to it is very important. If you ask them to stop worrying, they're not going to stop worrying.
Yeah,
But
obviously. Yeah.
acknowledge that I really appreciate your worry, and look at it positively. You can't make them stop worrying, and act more responsibly. If you display a lot of responsibility in your behavior, they are going to worry less. But if you show erratic behavior, if you show irresponsible and reckless behavior, they're probably going to worry more, because they have seen you grow as a child with certain traits. So don't show those traits in front of parents. They're likely to worry less, but they could have an anxiety problem. So a visit to a mental health professional would be great, because they might be worrying, and that could actually be a sign of anxiety disorder. So needs to be
Okay.
handled.
Okay. So the next question is how do you remove stubbornness? I have tried everything, carrot and stick. Reward system make my 4-year-olds understand the logical consequences. He just seems to be saying no for everything.
How do you react is very important when the child says no to everything. If you are kind and firm, I usually give this example of parents should be like the pizza dough, or parathe ka dough, or parathe ka atta. It's firm, at the same time it's flexible.
Huh.
They should not be like dosa batter, which allows everything to get into it. Like if you drop a spoon into the dosa batter, it goes in. So parents shouldn't be excessively permissive. Parents should be kind and firm. They should be like a stone as well, which is very hard and punitive. They are punishing. So number one is the parenting style is important. You need to say no kindly but firmly. Now there has to be consistency in the parent itself, himself or herself. So every time they need to be kind and firm, not depending on your mood, whether, if you're in a good mood, you will say yes. And if you're in a bad mood, you will say no. So there has to be consistency. Both the parents should be having the similar style of parenting. They both should be consistent with each other. And grandparents need to be consistent with the parents. A major battle would be winning cooperation from all these parties. So if everyone is consistent, kind and firm, children are likely to respond differently. That doesn't guarantee, but likely to respond
Hmm.
differently. But what I can see from the question is that this person has, Mr. Silent Crusader, he has tried everything. We need to evaluate the child probably for ADHD, but it's too early to probably jump on a conclusion.
Hmm.
If
Okay.
children consistently show hyperactivity and defiance, like not following any rules, we need to check them for certain things. It could be anything, any disorder that could be treated, and such problems are usually treatable. So I would suggest that consult a psychologist or a
But
psychiatrist
do you
or a
think,
pediatrician. Yeah.
okay, do you think this problem of attention can come at a very early age, at the age of
Yes,
4?
yes. Yes, it,
Okay.
it can come at a very early age. In fact, but that has to be in a different context. So if a child has to be diagnosed with ADHD, the child should be hyperactive in a variety of contexts, not just at home, but also at school, at play, everywhere the child shows consistent behavior. Then we can say that they probably have a disorder. So I would suggest that needs to be evaluated by seeing the child personally, but such problems are treatable. If they have tried consistent parenting style and it has failed, then it's time for evaluation.
Okay. Mm, okay, we have another question. Hi, Shishir sir. Are anxiety attacks increased with asthma? How do you control a panic attack without medication?
Okay, so Sonal, there are two questions here. One is asthma and anxiety. Are anxiety attacks worsened by asthma, or asthma worsens anxiety attacks? They both play a role of, increasing or triggering each other. So if someone is asthmatic, they are likely to get anxiety. And if someone is anxious, then they are likely to get an asthmatic episode. Panic disorder is different. Is something different. It has nothing to do with asthma. The question about panic disorder, what was that? How to control a panic attack without
Yep.
medication? So first thing about a panic attack is don't try to control it. Even if you don't do anything, the panic episode will go away on its own. So this is slightly off the context of today's discussion, but just to answer your question, don't try to control panic attack. Go to a CBT therapist. They would teach you how to react in a panic situation or a panic episode.
Thank you, Shishir. We will take the last question and coming back to what we were discussing
Sure.
about parenting. What do you think are the myths about parenting that, what are the myths about parenting in modern day, modern day world of modern day
Loads,
parent? Yeah.
loads of them, loads of them. Um, I would say the first myth is children are miniature adults. They're not.
Okay.
They're not miniature adults. Their thinking is significantly different from parents. So just because they understand language, they are intelligent, does not mean that they have the cognitive abilities to think like a parent or look at all sides of the situation. Number one. Uh, Another myth is that at least one parent should be strict and punitive, and एक parent का तो भी खौफ होना चाहिए.
The
This is a
good cop
big,
and the bad
big
cop.
myth, big myth about parenting. No, both the parents rather have similar parenting style, and that would rather be kind and firm, right?
Okay.
So, punishment is effective. This is another myth. Punishment is not effective. It only gets you compliance, which means that the child may obey what you want to say, but it does not teach the child how to react differently next time when the same thing happens. So another myth is like, punishment is very, very effective. No, it's not. In fact, it is counterproductive. The child, it damages the child's self-image, and children who are brought up with a lot of punishments, they are more prone to addictions in future. So addictive behaviors, or it could be addictive substances. So alcohol, smoking, everything is very, very common with extremely strict parenting. So if you think, another myth is that our parents hit us and we came out fine. So if I hit my child, he's gonna be fine too. A big myth. Who says that you are fine? You know, You are saying that you are
Yeah.
fine, So, but not necessarily. If you are hitting your child, it is a signal that you're not fine, right? You already
You
have
are.
a signal, yeah, you're not fine. If you even contemplate hitting your child, so that's a red flag for me. You may be claiming that you're fine, but you're not. So hitting children is not appropriate. Just because your parents applied a style and so-called you came out fine does not mean that the same thing will be applicable to today's children, because the time has changed, but the basic concepts remain the same. So quite a lot of parenting myths, but I think these are major ones where you need to introspect that not all children's problems are children's own problems. At the same time, not all children's problems are because of the parents. So it's a combination of child's developing brain. Second is the way parents are reacting to the child, and the third one is the child's own thinking. So we say it's a complex interplay of the triggers that or factors that lead to a child's problem. So not you cannot put a finger on one thing. So these are a few myths about parenting.
Yeah.
I think we can go on and on.
Yeah. So yes, actually, I believed in certain myths in these, so I can know not being a parent, but still. So anyway, I guess we have four questions, but I think it's time to end our live session. Thank you so much, Shashir, for joining us, and
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Baljit, for giving me this opportunity. So, and thank you all the wonderful audience for lovely questions and so much of interaction. Those bubbling hearts that came up all through the
They're
session
still
kept me
coming.
motivated, and I really appreciate. If you think that this session has been helpful to you, please tag your friends who are parents and who may be having similar myths about parenting. So please tag them in the Instagram live, that is, or Instagram IGTV video that's going to be published afterwards. And thank you very much. Keep in touch. Thanks,
Thank you.
Baljit. Keep up the good
Thank you
work.
so much, Shashir.
Ciao.
Thank you guys for being a part of this session. I will be doing more session as my time allows. So if there is anything you want me to discuss, any topic, any subject, anything, you can just DM me. I will try to frame questions. You can also send me questions about that, and we will be doing more sessions. Thank you so much. Thank you.